Welcome to Natural Beauty Summit's Love and Babies, a Health Journey. I'm your host, Salome Sallehy, founder of Sugar Wax, and my co-host here is Angela Chung, founder of M-Beauty. Today's conversation is all about postpartum recovery and how home and food is the cornerstone of that. Angela, tell us a little bit about our awesome guest.
So today we're speaking with Lindsay Taylor. She is a postpartum and infant care doula, as well as a culinary nutrition expert. She is the author of the book, The Food Doula Cookbook, where she teaches new moms how to nourish their bodies after giving birth, transforming nutritional science into real-world practical solutions to help moms feel supported, nourished, and energized.
Recovery is such an important part of birth and the parenting process. So in this conversation, we're exploring your home, your food, and how to make just that whole postpartum recovery a lot easier and healthier for your body and your baby. So stay tuned for my conversation with Lindsay Taylor. Welcome to Natural Beauty Summit, everyone, and our Love and Babies, a Health Journey series. Today, I'm here with Lindsay Taylor, the food doula, and we're going to be talking about nutrition and healing with food and all the good things. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to dive into it.
All right, well, let's get started. Now, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is as a fast food society, and I have to admit, I've had probably way more fast food since I've had kids and a busier life than I would like to admit. But as a fast food society, we kind of like eat to avoid hunger. We're not really like nourishing our bodies, or maybe we don't see that function around food. So what I'd love to hear from you is, how did you kind of shift that paradigm and start thinking about food as like an opportunity to like nourish and heal our bodies?
Yeah, no, it's such a great point. For most of us, we depend on convenience foods because that's just a function of getting through our day, right? There's nothing to necessarily feel bad about. Our society has shifted. We don't necessarily feel like we have an hour 3 times a day to prep maybe the type of meal that we imagine in our brains that we would love to feed ourselves with. The way that it shifted for me was, I think, in two parts. The first is I'm a health researcher by training, and I almost couldn't ignore the power of nutrition and nourishment, particularly in my area of focus of pregnancy and postpartum, because it was abundantly clear to me looking at the research that this is powerful. This isn't just a take it or leave it. It would be nice to get some nourishing foods in. It would be nice to take a prenatal vitamin in this stage. It was very, very convincing. We have hundreds of journal articles that have shown the difference in outcomes in a pregnancy experience, in getting pregnant, in baby's development, in postpartum life, really for the rest of our lives, is dependent in some part with many other factors, but also is influenced by the way that we nourish our body. So that sort of, I think, forced me into that mindset of thinking about nourishment differently, especially for this life stage. And then the other more powerful piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of people can really resonate with is through lived experience or even witnessed experience. So for me in my own life, in going through pregnancy and going through postpartum, and both as a doula and seeing my clients live their lives day in, day out, it became, again, abundantly clear to me how much of a difference being nourished well could make that experience. And it was the difference between feeling like your tank was empty. Because let's face it, a lot of us, especially in postpartum, it's not just hard to eat well, it's hard to eat at all. And so we're so depleted after a pregnancy and giving birth. We're so depleted because there just isn't time or support or help to nourish ourselves well for that stage, that I was seeing a vast difference between people that were barely eating and were super depleted in their energy, their mental health, their sleep, their mood, all of those pieces, their physical healing even, and those people who it was more natural for them to prioritize their nourishment. Maybe they sought help to make sure there was meals ready. They had a doula, they got meals delivered or something like that. And the difference in their energy, their mood, the way that they their mindset was and they approached their day was just vastly different. That was the fire that got lit under me, because I think everybody deserves to feel like that. Everybody deserves to feel as good as they can. And if food is a way to help us get there, then I wanted to be part of that solution and uncomplicating it so it felt more doable for everybody.
Yeah. And, postpartum is such an important stage of pregnancy almost, I would say, because like you said, you've been so depleted, your body needs so much, and you're also giving so much from your body to this little baby if you're nursing and eat, or if you're pumping or doing whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. Like, one of the things, like, I think we all know that like food is important, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think works against us is that this expectation that we're supposed to be depleted, we're supposed to be exhausted. Can you share a story of like maybe like someone who may have not been nourished, and then what their experience was versus then they started to become nourished and what their experience became? Because I think like, because we have this awful expectation to begin with, we're like, okay, whatever, what difference is it going to make? Right? I'm going to be exhausted anyway. And if I'm spending like hours cooking, then like that's going to exhaust me even more. So what is the transformation? I want you to paint a picture of like what that could look like.
Oh, yeah. And you're right. That sets us up for failure in a way because, and this is how we're sort of brushed off sometimes in the medical care system, is we are told that this is a normal part of postpartum,
Yeah.
right? You're supposed to be low energy. You're supposed to have no sleep. It's okay to have a low mood. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay for your hair to fall out. It's okay for you to feel like you have skin changes. But actually, there are degrees here. So it would be normal for some of those things to be experienced in a mild form. But when we see people who are barely functioning throughout the day, who are really struggling with their mood and their frustration, whose, hair is falling out to like a very dramatic degree, who feel like, maybe their heart rate is racing, who feel like I'm craving so much sugar all day in the afternoon, some of those things are not just normal. Some of those things are actually pointing to a lack of nutrients because our body can't just function off of an empty tank. Our body relies on a nutrient supply to actually function, to do things like sleep and rest well, to do things like regulate our nervous system and allow us to react in a way that is more aligned with who we are as we go throughout our day. So I have had a lot of clients who have come and said to me, this is just postpartum, but like, can I feel better? And sometimes it's fast because sometimes it's not that, okay, we need to dive deep and spend 8 months working on your nourishment. Sometimes it's like 2 weeks later where we talk about nourishment, we look at their day, and we're not trying to change everything that they eat. We're not trying to put them on $1,000 of supplements every single day. It's where are actually the little opportunities where all I'm looking for is actually 5 minutes here for a little bit of food prep. I'm actually making a small list of 4 or 5 foods that are going to be really important at getting in some of those most nourishing foods into my client's day. And just sprinkling those extra 5 or 10 minutes, that extra handful of foods each and every day. In 2 weeks, when I talk to my client the next time, it's like, oh my gosh, I actually significantly already have more energy. Significantly already, my hair's not falling out as much. Significantly already, I actually notice that I have more, higher supply of my breast milk. And all of these things are related, and it doesn't have to be super complicated and super intense. Small gradual changes can really make a huge difference in all of those factors.
I love that. That seems really approachable. And I think one of the things that's kind of like eating and eating right can seem overwhelming, especially these days where there's so much information about like what's good for you, what's not good for you. Like, there's this cleanse, there's that cleanse, there's this way of eating. Like, if you have inflammation, if you have arthritis, like, there's an overwhelming amount of information around what it means to eat well. So, do you have like, how do you help your clients navigate that? And like, do you have like a framework you can share? Um, you know, what can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we
I think
find our eating well star?
yeah. How do we find that for ourselves? Because so much of the time, we chase it, right? We think like, oh, I'm hearing so much about intermittent fasting or keto, or should I eat vegan? Like, is this the right way to eat for all of us? And the answer is absolutely not. There is not one single diet, one single way of fueling our bodies that makes sense and actually works and is aligned with the sort of bio individuality that each and every one of us have. So, and I find we get lost in the details, right? When we hear about specific nutrients, specific eating patterns, times, pairings of foods, where I find I like to start is bringing it way down and not overcomplicating it. And practicing intuitive eating is where it starts. That's where I will start with almost everybody, because the first bit of data is the data about ourselves. What foods feel good in my body? And the way that we start to understand what foods feel good and what foods don't feel good is by practicing intuitive eating and bringing a lot of awareness to, hey, I'm actually going to think about how my body feels after I eat this meal. Because sometimes, similar to our discussion on postpartum, we might have symptoms like bloating or digestive complaints or headaches. And we might have been chalking that up to, that's just my body. That's just how I feel. I just get headaches. I just get bloated. But actually, you might not have to feel that way. You might start to see patterns emerge about foods that you're eating that actually don't make you feel good. So I
Mm.
like to start there. And then I like to start with some of the foundations before getting into any like missing specific nutrients or anything like that. It's what are some slow, gradual changes for things like, how are you doing with protein in your day? Could
Mhm.
we get some more vegetables on your plate? So it doesn't have to be these giant, large changes. It can be small, gradual changes that work for where you are now and what your capacity is at the grocery store, with your food budget, in the kitchen, with food prep. There's always something that can help you feel a little bit better.
I love that. Now, what are some of the like you mentioned earlier, like a handful of like more nutrient dense foods? If we are having like a really busy day, what are some of
Yeah,
those like hacks that we can incorporate like high density nutrients without having to like derail our entire day?
totally. I'm going to give you four. I think that almost everybody can benefit from squeezing in at least one of these four foods every single day. The first one is eggs. Eggs can be added to absolutely any meal of the day, no matter what you're having. If it's like a stir fry, it's a wrap, it's a taco, it's a salad. You can fry one single egg. You can have hard-boiled eggs in the fridge. Like, they can be ready to go. You can freeze scrambled eggs and then just take them out of the freezer. Those are our powerhouse of nutrients, including the yolk. We don't want the yolk to go away. So we've got protein there. We have our omega-3 fats. We have choline. We have vitamin B12 and other beautiful B vitamins that we need for our nourishment. We've got lots of minerals. That's one of the easy add-ons I think everybody can benefit from. The next is going to be seeds. So when I work with clients, a lot of the times we're looking at what is their blood sugar balance like. And for most people, we end up, because of our convenience eating, we end up sort of going really high on the carbohydrate and sugar end of things in our meals and snacks, and a little too low on our proteins and our fats. And for most people, it's not necessarily possible, especially in early stages of thinking through our nourishment, to suddenly make all new meals. But what we can do is take a meal that's already done, look at that plate and say, 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 plate
You
and
hear
say,
that?
plate and say, plate and say, plate and say, plate and say, plate and say. Is that better?
Yeah. Did you hear that?
I actually can't hear it, but that's happened before. Was my
It was
voice?
looping. Plate and say, plate and say, plate and say. Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna resume.
okay,
Okay,
resume.
we are back to recording. Okay. Wait. Okay. So let's go back
Yeah, let's go back.
to the seeds you were saying.
Okay, absolutely. So throwing on a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of seeds on a finished meal is an easy way. All you have to do is keep it in your fridge, and then you're boosting the protein, the fat, and the micronutrient density of the meal with zero prep time. The third thing I think everyone can benefit from is an extra handful of any type of leafy greens. These are, again, our micronutrient powerhouse. Pretty much the nutrients almost everybody is missing, we can find in our beautiful greens. So, like spinach, kale, collard greens, bok choy, broccoli, asparagus, anything like that. Buy what you like. A lot of people ask me, like, but what's the best one? And my answer is always like, but what will you buy versus what's going to sit in your refrigerator and get sadder and sadder and sadder? So if there's something that you love, if that's romaine lettuce, that's great. Like there's no bad green. And look for an opportunity to add an extra handful every single day. And finally, the fourth one that again is really easy but super impactful is some kind of canned fish or seafood. So
Mm.
that could be like canned salmon, canned tuna, canned sardines. No prep. We're going to open it up and we're going to add that to our toast, to our salads, to our bowls, because we're really going to benefit from those omega-3 fats, specifically DHA and EPA, that are almost impossible to get anywhere outside of fish and seafood. And it's really important to our mental health, our brains, and also in the stage of pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, and postpartum. It's actually going to influence the brain development of baby. So as much as possible, we can maximize in one of those four ways every single day. Then you're doing a great job.
Okay, I have 2 questions. So
Yeah.
when it comes to canned fish, I mean, I'm generally apprehensive about anything canned. And then you also have that other layer of like, don't have large mercury fish when you're pregnant. So would you say like do more salmon and sardines, or would you say maybe like let's debunk some of those myths? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I love talking about this because I've had clients that have said, I've been told to eat no fish, to reduce my fish intake, to not even have anything that comes from the sea, which is just ridiculous. So, where we need to be cautious is we need to weigh both the pros and the cons. So, on the con side, which is where we get that fear response, is we don't want, like exactly like you said, high mercury fish for pregnancy and for breastfeeding. We do not want that. But for the most part, we're talking about huge fish that eat other fish like shark, marlin, orange roughy, large tuna species. We want those less frequently. It doesn't mean if you have one of those fish a month or every 2 weeks that you're going to have too high mercury for your pregnancy. It's just something to watch out for. But on the other side, we have exactly like you said, fish that are very low mercury, but very high in those essential fats that we need, like salmon and sardines. And so, yes, I would say those are the ones to prioritize over other fish if at all possible. And then with the pros and cons of canned foods, I would argue that the pros of getting in more of these essential nutrients for pregnancy by far overwhelms any cons of having a little bit of canned food in your diet, because we know most pregnant people are not getting enough omega 3s. And we see a very clear association in things like brain development, attention, memory, emotional and cognitive processing, IQ. So, more pregnant people need to be aware of that because their health providers are most often saying, like, oh, just be aware instead of let's have a balanced approach and talk about the pros and cons.
Wait a minute. You're saying that brain stuff happens in the mom. We're not even talking about the baby at this point? Is that
It's really both. Yeah, it's
is
really
that
both.
what pregnancy brain is? They talk about that?
Yes. So there are so many facets to this. So on the one hand, there is a connection to baby's brain development for life. On the other hand, for our own brain development, we see a lack of omega-3s both being associated with exactly what, like you said, that mom brain, like non-precise thinking, forgetfulness, that can be associated with omega-3s, but also our rates of postpartum and perinatal mood disorders. We see a very clear link in the research with higher rates of postpartum depression among moms who have lower levels of DHA in their brains. So this is a very impactful food tip for everybody in this stage. For us too, it's not just about baby, it's for our own mental health.
Oh my God, I had no idea. I just thought that like baby brain or mommy brain was like a thing that no one can explain.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways it is. Our brains change when we have babies and in really beneficial ways. But on other ways where we're like, I just can't think straight, this can be one of the things that can help that.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, another thing I want to ask you about was the first food you mentioned, which is like eggs and colon.
Yeah.
And what is colon and where was it when I was pregnant? Like nobody talked about it, 7, 8 years ago, even 6, 5 years ago. What happened? Is this a new discovery? Why is everyone talking about it now?
Yeah, I love that question because likewise, I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I had no idea through my pregnancies that this was a critical nutrient. So this nutrient called choline, it's like a vitamin-like substance. So we don't even know, like, is it a vitamin? Is it a mineral? Like, what is it? But over the last 10 years or so, lots of research has emerged showing that for every stage of pregnancy and postpartum, from like a couple of years before you get pregnant through every stage of pregnancy, choline is critical, and it's critical for three huge reasons. One is its role in what's called epigenetic programming. So this is one of my favorite topics in prenatal nutrition is how can we actually influence through the nutrition we're giving our bodies how our baby's genetics are going to be programmed and coded, not just for their fetal development, not just for infancy and childhood, but for literally their entire lifespan. And so choline is one of those nutrients where getting enough can help set the stage for very healthy lifelong health. We also know that choline is critical for brain development. In that same way that I said we have studies with these key omega-3 acids in brain development, attention, memory, IQ, we also see those same trends among moms who get enough choline in their diet. And then the third thing is the placenta relies on choline for things like cell division and everything the placenta needs to provide to house the fetus. Choline is one of those essential nutrients our placenta needs to be healthy and to thrive. So, where we get it, and the reason why we talk so much about it now, is these trends are so interesting. If you think about the foods that have been demonized over the last 10 years, 20 years, we see things like saturated fats. We've been told, especially in pregnancy, do not have saturated fats, lower it. That's the number one advice around fats that we see for pregnancy. So things like eggs, things like red meat, things like organ meats that are very high saturated fat. And it just so happens that it's those foods exactly where we get choline. We don't really get it in other foods. We get it a little bit in cruciferous veggies and things like cauliflower and broccoli. But the mega doses that we were getting in our diet 40, 50 years ago have now more or less been eliminated or reduced to the amount that 95% plus of pregnant people are not getting enough choline in their diets, which is why we're talking about it so much now.
So I have to ask this because I mean, I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but I know a lot of people that are, and I'm sure there's people in our audience.
Yeah.
Like, how do vegan people navigate pregnancy? Is it just with like a boatload of supplements?
Yes. So 100%. So for some of these nutrients where the biggest dose that we can find in natural food is in animal products. So it's things like choline and it's things like vitamin B12. We are going to be leaning more heavily on supplements. That's just a fact. We can prioritize things I mentioned like cauliflower and broccoli. Legumes also have some choline. So we can make some smart decisions around prioritizing those plant foods that are high in some of these easy to miss nutrients. But then the other piece of the puzzle does become let's look at that prenatal multi how much choline is in there, for instance, because for a long time, choline wasn't in there at all. And for a
Yeah.
lot of my clients, especially a one a day, choline isn't in there, or it's in there in a very, very small amount. So then it becomes, how can we add to that? Do we need to take a standalone choline supplement? And for someone who's a vegan, the answer to that is probably yes, depending on how much is in their prenatal multi. So it's really about taking a foods first approach, but using our toolkit with prenatal vitamins and other supplements to make sure that we're at least hitting those minimum needs for pregnancy and some of those nutrients.
Okay, that is great. Thank you for clarifying that. That was major, major download for me because that was like, I had no idea. All I know is that since I've been doing the summit, all the research has pointed to colon. And I'm like, what is this choline thing that everyone's talking?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for clarifying that. And it's funny, this keeps making me think of the show that I was watching on Netflix recently. I won't name it, but it's like ancient, like Denmark, right? That's the setting, like 300 years ago. And this princess who is a new princess is like, there's that pressure she has to provide an heir. And they keep making her drink like 6 raw eggs in the morning. And I'm like, what is this disgusting like custom? Like, where did this come from? Why does this even exist? And now I'm like, you know what? There's some weird wisdom in some of these
Yeah.
older like traditions.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now we're kind of getting the like research to substantiate it.
Exactly. Which isn't that so fascinating that we can learn? There are so many learnings from ancestral eating, ancestral wisdom all over the world. You start to see trends like, interesting, even though these cultures are, so far apart geographically, when we learn about the traditional foods and the sacred foods that they would feed women before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy, there's similarities here. And only now do we, of course, see science is sort of giving us our, Western explanation for
Fine.
why are these actually amazing foods to fuel someone in this life stage? There's reasons behind that, which is just so cool.
Okay. So I'm gonna focus on the different stages, but I just want to ask one question personally for me now.
Yes.
Because like one of the things that I've been wondering about is, when I was pregnant and breastfeeding and a new mom, like there was so much attention around my nutrition, supplements, and like, all the things that we're talking about. But now that, our kids are almost the same age, that the kids are older, like I'm kind of having a hard time with like finding the right supplements because I'm like, wait, but this doesn't have all the things that like a prenatal vitamin would. And like sometimes I'm like, why wouldn't I take a prenatal vitamin instead of just like a one a day? Like, you know what I mean? So what are your thoughts on that? Like life way after kids.
Yeah.
Um, why is this a cultural thing? Is it like our body just has different needs and like the prenatals aren't gonna like support it? Like, what is it?
Yeah, you're gonna laugh when I tell you what I do, but I'll back up first and say that everybody's needs are different. We're all going to be at different stages of depletion for X number of years postpartum. People are still depleted, like in the stage that we are, 6 years after, 8 years after. It is incredibly depleting. We lose a minimum of 10% of our body's minerals for each pregnancy. And it's hard to eat well, in the at least couple of years following each baby. And depending on how many babies there are, many of us are still in a state of nutrient depletion that's impacting how we go throughout our lives. So everyone's going to have different needs and different things that their body requires, different symptoms. But I will say that I personally do take a prenatal vitamin. I am not pregnant. However,
Okay, thank you.
that's why I'm
If you're
laughing.
not being
Yeah, honestly, because this is the best bang for my buck. And the reason for that is what makes prenatal multivitamins different than like a woman's one a day is the dosing is going to be higher for some of our key things that all of us don't get enough of, right? Things like our B12, our choline, our vitamin D. Plus, they have way more minerals. So they're going to have some iron in it. There's going to be zinc, there's going to be selenium, things that we actually don't really see included or dosed in a meaningful way in some of the one-a-days. So especially if you energy and your hair and all of these things that we sort of, vain or not, we want to feel good about, a prenatal multi can actually be good for people after pregnancy, at least
Thank
for the
you.
postpartum number of years. Yeah, of course.
Oh my gosh, because I was like, am I the only one looking at the ingredients and it doesn't make sense? Like, why wouldn't I have more? And I actually wasn't on prenatals like for a number of years after I had my babies, but like now I'm like back on it because I'm like, it's just better for me. And I
Yeah.
think you're totally right. There's been so many studies that talk about this like nutrient depletion that can last up to 10 years after you have a child. So why am I giving my body less? So thank you. I thought I was crazy, but apparently I'm
You
not the
are not. No, no, you have a good idea there.
I love it. Okay. So, at each stage of pregnancy, trimester 0, like when you're before you conceived, and then, the first trimester, you're throwing up most of the time. Second, third trimester, and then obviously postpartum. Each of these stages has different requirements, it's taking different taxes out of our bodies. Can you speak to each of these stages and maybe highlight one or two things that are important in like preconception, first trimester, second, third, and fourth trimester?
Yeah, sure. So for our preconception trimester 0, I find this topic so fascinating because there truly are things that we can do to set the stage for not just fertility. Food can help us get pregnant faster, but it can also help set the stage for a healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy. So where I like to say to start in trimester 0 is with blood sugar balance, because we see risks from preconception all the way through every stage of pregnancy when someone's blood sugar is just a little too high, not high enough where they're going to be diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which is kind of the only time pregnancy care providers will talk about blood sugar balance. We have really good research showing that even mildly high blood sugar is going to be related to things from lower fertility, higher risk of miscarriage, to fetal brain development, to our own risk of complications through pregnancy and babies' birth outcomes. So I encourage people to look at every single meal and snack and say, is there fat here? Is there protein here? And is there fiber? And 9 times out of 10, what's going to be missing is that fat or protein. Like we talked about, can we add seeds here? Can we add an egg? Can we add half an avocado? Can we add some canned fish? That's going to be very, very powerful, as is upping the plants. So from a very practical standpoint, if you're in trimester 0, you want to try and see, can I add in 1 or 2 more servings of plants a day? My favorite way to do that, as I mentioned, is a handful of leafy greens, but anything else, if you can add a few cut up carrots to your morning breakfast plate, if you can add some steamed asparagus on your lunch bowl, if you can add even a few slices of cut up cucumber at dinner, anything that you can add all day long is going to support those minerals and those key vitamins that we just want to add, take up a notch, so our body feels like this is a place where I have room to spare. I have things to give. I have enough for me, and I have enough surplus left over to grow a baby. This is a safe space. And then if we move over to pregnancy, one of the nutrients beyond choline that I think that everybody can benefit from looking at in your day is actually iron. So we start talking about iron a lot in prenatal care in the third trimester. Most of us are at that point told by our OB or our midwife, hey, you actually have really low iron. You need to start an iron supplement. If we don't start thinking about iron until the third trimester, there are some experts that believe that it's too late. It doesn't matter what you do, you are not going to get your iron levels to rise enough to have a meaningful difference on how you feel and to lower some of those risks that are associated with low iron. So we need to start thinking about iron at the very beginning of pregnancy. Where are we at? Can we take a blood test? How's our iron looking? And then we want to prioritize high iron foods before pregnancy and in the beginning of pregnancy, if at all possible. So the foods that our body likes the best and we're going to get the most iron out of is going to be, again, those animal proteins. So things like red meats, organ meats, our eggs, our fish, our seafood, those foods have what's called heme iron, and our body's going to like that a little bit better. We're going to get more from it. But if you don't eat animal proteins, you want to lean into our plant iron sources, things like legumes and beans and our leafy greens, our nuts and seeds, all the time throughout the entire stage of pregnancy, not just the end of pregnancy. And then I also, sorry, go ahead.
As someone who's like struggled with iron in the past, like that makes so much sense because like I'm not a vegetarian, so I do eat like the red meats and stuff, but like when your iron levels are low, even if you are having the animal iron, the heme iron, it takes so long to build it back up. And that's not even during a pregnancy where just the blood flow and production in your body is high. So that is huge. Like look at your iron regardless.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You don't want to wait until iron is a problem because it really is an uphill losing battle. So we can do some other strategic things, right? Like so one of the ways that you can maximize the iron that you absorb from food is to pair those rich iron sources, plant or animal iron sources, with sources of vitamin C. Basically, that just means plants. So if you make sure again that you add more plants to your plate, leafy greens, veggies, fruits, the other thing you're going to do is guarantee with every meal, you've got lots of vitamin C on your plate. With lots of vitamin C, your body's going to be able to pull more iron from those foods to benefit your body. So everything's connected, right? So making an effort in one way is going to benefit you in all other ways, like getting in more plants.
I love that. And I love how
Yeah.
approachable you make it because, you know, I think sometimes when I remember nutrition and I'm like, oh my God, and I go into a big grocery shop and I literally buy like a boatload of produce and like probably forget half of it, which is not cool. But like, then I'm like, I make a big roast vegetable tray and all of this. But then for the in-betweens, maybe it doesn't need to be such a big production. Maybe you just like, hey, you know, today I'm just going to like boil or steam some beets and have that on the side of my food. And I love that approach. I think it's so much more digestible. Anyway, I'm going to let you move on to the first trimester.
No problem. No, it's such a great point. And we all do that to ourselves. And my background is in health behavior change. I know that we don't succeed when we try and do 100 things at once. We succeed when we're like, exactly what you said. I'm going to add beets to my meals this week. And then you're going to feel good about it because you actually did it. And
Yeah.
then next week, you're going to add to that. And that's the way that we win with food and nutrition.
Totally.
So we're going to do our iron, we're going to do our choline, and then DHA. We talked about that. I won't go into detail. We've talked about it. So key to get our beautiful fish and our seafood in. But then moving on to the postpartum stage, again, like preconception, I think that the best thing we can do is not get lost in all the various nutrients. The best thing we can do when we're postpartum, we have a baby at home, is get in more protein containing foods, because where we're going to find those nutrients that most of us are depleted after 9 months plus of a pregnancy, where most of us are going to get the nutrients that are going to make the biggest difference in how we feel in those postpartum months, we're going to find those nutrients in protein containing foods. And the way we eat shifts. So I find when I work with clients, we prioritize our nutrition in pregnancy. We're like, okay, I'm going to get those plants. I'm going to make the meals. Like if we feel up to it, it's on our mind. We want to do a great job with our food. But then when we have a baby and we sort of go into newborn survival mode, our food shift. We're not so much eating like 3 main meals a day. We're sort of maybe even eating dinner, because that's when maybe our partner's home. We've thought about dinner. Someone's dropped off dinner for us. But breakfast, lunch, snacks, middle of the night, 3 a.m., we're grabbing snacks. So when we have most of our diet filled with sort of snacks and things from the pantry, my experience, that was 100%. I would grab cookies. I would grab crackers, like what's in my pantry that I don't need to think about, that I can eat with one hand while feeding a baby. we start to go way up on the carbohydrates and sugar, and our protein and fat goes way down, as does our nutrient density of our foods. So the number one thing that we can do is, we're not going to change the fact that it's really hard to eat and eat well in postpartum. But if we prioritize, okay, I'm going to go to the pantry, and instead of the cracker, I'm actually going to grab the tub of peanut butter. And I'm going to eat a little bit with a spoon. I'm going to grab the crackers with it. I'm going to cut up an apple. I can still eat that with one hand. Oh, I have some canned fish there. Could I mix that with some Greek yogurt and have that on my crackers? Or, oh, someone brought me meatballs in my freezer. Instead of only allocating that for family dinners, why don't I put a snack tray together? And I've got some things from my pantry, but I've also got some meatballs there. I could maybe put them in a pita, eat with one hand. So it's thinking through, how can we prioritize those proteins and therefore more nutrient density for our real life postpartum.
Okay, so question for you on proteins.
Yeah.
Do you recommend protein shakes?
So it depends. I think that protein shakes and protein powders can be a tool that we can start to lean on when things are really rough. So postpartum might be one of those times, and so can the first trimester, right? When we might have food aversions, we might be nauseous, we might be vomiting, we might only want beige foods. But if we can handle like a smoothie or a shake, I say let's do it, because that's when we need those types of easy tools. When we're picking the type of protein powder or protein shake, where I advise my clients to look at is, we want to make sure that that protein powder is third party tested. So you want to see those words on the bottle, because supplements are not widely regulated in the way that we want them to be. So when we're pregnant or breastfeeding, we want to make sure that what's on the label is actually what's in there. And then we want to stick to something that has a very short ingredient list, that has like one ingredient, right? Like a collagen protein or a hemp protein or a pea protein. We do not want to choose things that are trying to be an all-in-one, right? So I advise my clients not to go to like the super greens powders or the superfoods powders, because what that's going to look like is you'll get the protein, but you're also going to get lots of herbs, which may or may not be safe in those quantities for pregnancy or breastfeeding. We're also going to get a whole bunch of supplemental nutrients, which, in addition to the prenatal supplements you're on, might take you to a level of some of those nutrients that's too high to be safe. So let's stick to one ingredient, third party tested. And if that helps you get in more protein, especially for those two stages, then I think that's a win.
That's brilliant. Okay. You have me so inspired. I'm like, as soon as we're done with this call, I'm gonna go get out, like bust out my canned sardines, like go
Yes.
check my protein powders. Oh my goodness. I love this conversation. Okay, let's move on to the next trimester.
Sounds good. So, okay, remind me where we are. Okay, so we've talked about trimester 0, some prenatal, some postnatal. Do you want to go deep into any specific trimester?
Well, I think it's just really important to like just kind of address first trimester, because so many people can't eat, or they're throwing up and they're freaking out about whether they're getting the nutrients that they need. Like, why is the body doing that to
That's
us?
so mean.
It's so mean. Like, what's going on? What is this like?
No.
I've read that the body is doing that to protect the fetus from, you giving it crap, but does it only happen to crap eating people?
No, it doesn't. And isn't that wild? Like, we've been pregnant since the beginning of time, but we still don't really have an answer for why. What is the functional role of nausea and morning sickness and vomiting? There's various things that contribute, but we really don't know, and we really can't change it. One of the things with food that we can do is work on our blood sugar balance before pregnancy and early on in pregnancy, and also so that our nausea isn't as severe, and we can hopefully prevent our vomiting a little bit. Because what ends up happening is, when we are nauseous, people tell us, okay, have those saltines, have a piece of
Yeah,
Play-Dohs. Like, that's what we're told to eat. And
it's not
for a certain,
nutritious.
no, no, and for a certain extent, if that's all we can stomach, that's all we can stomach. There's no guilt there. However, what ends up happening is, if we just eat saltines, We already are nauseous. So our blood sugar is going to be really low. We might be a little bit shaky. When we eat something like just a bunch of saltines, we're delivering a hit of carbohydrates. Our blood sugar is going to go up. We might feel okay for a little bit of time, but then the after effect of that only carbohydrate meal is our blood sugar is going to plummet and the nausea is going to come back worse. And it might be accompanied with vomiting. Now, again, if that's all you can eat, there's no guilt there. Give your body whatever it can handle. Whatever food is better than no food. However, if you can tolerate saltines with some cheese, saltines with some peanut butter, saltines that actually aren't saltines, they're made of not wheat, but almond flour and sunflower seed flour or something like that, and you provide your body with a more blood sugar balancing snack or meal because there's protein and fat, we're going to have more even blood sugar and we're probably going to have more mild nausea and less vomiting. And I see that with my clients all the time. So if you're struggling with that postpartum, figure out what is a friendly food for you to put on your nightstand. Is it an almond flour cracker? Is it like a little muffin that you bake that has some protein and fat in it? Is it salted nuts? How can we get some more protein and fat to something that's going to feel good in your body? That's where I would start, and know that anything you give your body is good. There's no bad food that you should feel shameful about eating in the first trimester. All food has energy, and energy, calories, is the number one thing somebody who is in the first trimester needs. That is the number one thing. So always remember, you're doing a good thing. You're delivering to your body and your baby what it needs.
Those are great tips. And actually, it kind of makes me think about the third trimester where, we're huge and we're like, oh my God, like, what is all of this weight? The baby is this big and I'm like this big. And I've heard from a lot of moms that, they try to restrict calories in the third trimester. What are your thoughts about that? And I honestly have no opinion about it. I have no idea. So I'd love to get your expert opinion on like third trimester. How do we navigate calories, water retention? What helps?
Yeah, I know. And it can feel really alien for us to not recognize our body. And that can make us feel like, who am I? It challenges our self-identity. I want you to know that your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Your body is supposed to store tons of calories. Those are functional. Those are supposed to be calories that are used to produce breast milk. So that's totally normal, and it's not wrong to feel like that. For some of us, we get really uncomfortable when we eat, right? Which might be the reason behind, oh, maybe I want to cut calories and eat a little bit less, is the weight, but also how we feel in our bodies. I'm feeling more bloated. I feel like when I eat, there's no room in my stomach. I get acid reflux afterwards. Eating can be uncomfortable at the end of pregnancy. So one of the things that I like to suggest, so that we feel better, but we also make sure we're supplying our body with the nutrients we need, is I like to recommend going towards not necessarily grain-free eating, but prioritizing our proteins and our plants. So for instance, if you were in your third trimester and you were coming over to my house and I was making burgers with grilled veggies and a salad, what we might typically do is like get that burger on the bun and then get the other vegetables, but then we might get full after only a few bites. So instead, let's say you're having that meal, I would encourage you to put the burger on your plate, leave the bun, because that's going to fill you up. Wheat is more likely to cause acid reflux. And I would rather you eat more of that protein and more of those plants to be sure you're meeting your nutrient needs, even if you get full a little bit faster. So it's strategies like that that we can still do what we want to do, which is provide for baby, but feel a little bit better in our bodies and feel a little bit more comfortable going throughout the day.
That is awesome. Oh my goodness, you have shared so many great tips and in such a easy to digest manner. So I appreciate you so much.
That's
And
so
the
sweet.
guy,
Thank you.
of course. And if you guys want more of these amazing tips, check out the Food Doula cookbook, which is right behind Lindsay over there. And
Yes.
any final words where people can find you or connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one place that I'm always hanging out is on Instagram. So come check me out over there. It's at the.food.doula. Send me a DM. listening to this conversation triggers any questions for you, any concerns, I'm always on my DM. So please don't hesitate to send me a note, ask me a question, and we can connect over there.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Until the next episode.
Thanks
Bye.
for having me. Bye.
Hey, guys, we're back. Just wanted to say thank you for tuning in to the Natural Beauty Summit's Love and Babies, a Health Journey series. Angela and I have partnered together on this because it really has been a labor of love for us. And we've loved sharing these experts and insights with you and hope that some of the things that you learned, you'll be able to carry into your life, whether, your early relationship, whether you've been married for years, whether you're a seasoned parent or a brand new one. We hope some of this stuff has been helpful. We also want to remind you that we have put together a little baby box and with products from our experts and contributors to the series. So if you know a mom to be, there are amazing products in there for baby and mama. So I believe there's a link below that you can buy your baby box. Any words from you, Angela?
I just want to thank everybody for joining. I've personally learned so much. And I want to thank my co-host here, Salome, for helping to put this all together. And I hope that you guys have gotten as much out of this as I have. I know that, as a mom, it's hard sometimes to find all the information you need. And we hope that this sort of helps you along in that journey.
Yeah, and we hope that we can continue to be a resource for you throughout your parenting life. So again, thank you. If you have any questions about the show, our experts, or future summits, feel free to reach us at naturalbeautysummit.com or .org, naturalbeautysummit.org. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.